The dying light. They thought Earth was just another backwater world, a primitive planet with nothing but noise, chaos, and short-lived creatures. But they were wrong. Buried in our blood is the legacy of survival, a history written in fire and forged in hardship. When the stars finally noticed us, it wasn't our technology that terrified them. It was the terrifying truth that humans weren't born to run. They were raised to hunt. The discovery. Captain Sarah Chen pressed her palm against the cold viewport of the exploration vessel Pathfinder, watching the swirling nebula paint the darkness in shades of purple and gold. At 38, she had already seen more of the galaxy than most humans would in 10 lifetimes, but something about this sector felt different. The readings they were picking up defied explanation. "Captain, you need to see this," called out Lieutenant Marcus Webb from the communication station. His voice carried an urgency that made Sarah's pulse quicken. In the 3 years they'd been exploring together, Marcus rarely got excited about routine sensor suites. Sarah moved across the bridge with practiced ease, her magnetic boots clicking against the metal decking. The Pathfinder wasn't humanity's most advanced ship, but it was reliable, and that mattered more than cutting-edge technology, when you were months away from the nearest human outpost. "What do you have, Marcus?" The young officer's fingers flew across his console, bringing up a series of waveform patterns on the main display. "I've been monitoring subspace frequencies, and I keep picking up these signals. They're not random. There's definitely a pattern, almost like a distress call. But, Captain, these transmissions have been going on for over 2 decades. Dr. Elena Vasquez, the ship's xenobiologist, looked up from her research station with interest. Her dark eyes sparkled with the curiosity that had driven her to join humanity's exploration efforts. 20 years. That's longer than we've had reliable faster-than-light communication. Who could be sending signals for that long without getting a response?" Chief Engineer Tom Bradley, a gruff man in his 50s, whose hands were permanently stained with engine grease, grunted from his position near the power systems. "Maybe nobody wants to answer. Galaxies full of species that mind their own business." Sarah studied the waveforms, noting their complexity and the haunting regularity of their repetition. "Where are these signals coming from?" "That's the thing, Captain," Marcus replied, adjusting the sensor array. "The source is moving, but slowly. Based on the trajectory, it's following a decaying orbit around a dying star system about 6 light-years from here. If my calculations are correct, whoever's sending these signals is in serious trouble." First contact. The Pathfinder dropped out of hyperspace 3 days later at the edge of the Kepler 442 system. What they found took their breath away. The system's primary star, once a brilliant yellow giant, was now a dying red dwarf, its surface fluctuating with massive solar flares that sent waves of deadly radiation across space. But it wasn't the star that captured their attention. It was the structure orbiting just outside the radiation zone. A massive crystalline construct, easily 20 kilometers across, tumbled slowly through space. Its surface caught and refracted the dying star's light, creating a spectacular display of rainbow patterns that seemed almost alive. "My God," whispered Dr. Vasquez. "It's beautiful." "It's also falling apart," Tom observed grimly, studying the engineering readouts. "Whatever that thing is made of, it's not designed to handle this much radiation. The molecular structure is breaking down." Sarah ordered a full sensor sweep while Marcus worked to isolate the source of the distress signals. What they discovered changed everything they thought they knew about the galaxy. The crystalline structure wasn't a space station. It was a living ship, home to a species unlike anything humanity had encountered. The beings inside, who called themselves the Valix, were creatures of living crystal and light, their bodies composed of sentient minerals that could reshape themselves at will. When first contact was finally established, the being who greeted them spoke in harmonious tones that resonated through the ship's hull. Their translator struggled to convert the musical language into words humans could understand. "I am harmony of many voices, speaker for the Valix collective. We had given up hope that anyone would answer our call. Your species. We have not encountered humans before. You are very young, are you not? Sarah stepped forward, her hands clasped behind her back in a gesture of respect. I am Captain Sarah Chen of the United Earth Exploration Command. We received your distress signals. What can we tell us about your situation? The response that came back was filled with a sadness so profound it seemed to echo in their bones. The Valix explained that they were the last survivors of an ancient civilization that had once spanned dozens of star systems. Their homeworld's core had become unstable centuries ago, forcing them to flee in their living ships. One by one, their vessels had failed, their people dying as their crystalline forms lost cohesion in the coldest space. This ship, their last refuge, carried the final 43,000 Valix in existence. They had been seeking sanctuary for over 200 years, but every spacefaring civilization they encountered had turned them away. We have reached out to all the great powers, Harmony of Many Voices explained. The Corvani Empire declared us genetic deviants and threatened to destroy our ship if we entered their territory. The Zeltharan Confederacy said we were too alien to integrate into their society. The Trade Federation of Worlds calculated that the cost of relocating us exceeded our potential economic contribution. Dr. Vasquez leaned forward, her scientific mind racing. What about your technology? Surely a species as advanced as yours would have something to offer. We are not builders of weapons or engines of war, came the gentle reply. Our gifts lie in harmony, with ourselves, with living things, with the fundamental forces that bind matter together. We can heal wounds that other medical technology cannot touch. We can help barren worlds bloom with life. We can sing to broken crystals and make them whole again. But the galaxy, it seems, has no need for such things. The cold reality. Over the next several hours, Sarah and her crew learned the full scope of the Valix's desperate situation. Their living ship was dying, its crystalline matrix slowly losing coherence as the radiation from the dying star overwhelmed its ability to repair itself. They had perhaps 6 months before the vessel would break apart completely, condemning every Valix aboard to death in the vacuum of space. More heartbreaking was the record of their attempts to find sanctuary. The Valix had meticulously documented every contact with other species, every plea for help, every rejection. The responses formed a pattern that made Sarah's stomach turn. The Corvani Empire had not only refused aid, but had actually fired warning shots when a Valix ship had approached their border. The message was clear: approach again and face destruction. The Zeltharan Confederacy had offered to accept a small number of Valix as exotic specimens for study, but only if the rest of the population agreed to euthanasia to prevent contamination of Confederate space. The Trade Federation had performed a cost-benefit analysis and determined that the resources required to relocate the Valix could instead be used to establish 3 profitable mining colonies. Even smaller independent worlds had turned them away, citing fears of the unknown or simple lack of resources. It's not right, Dr. Vasquez said quietly during a private conference in Sarah's ready room. These beings have done nothing wrong. They're refugees fleeing a natural disaster, and the entire galaxy has abandoned them. Tom Bradley, despite his gruff exterior, was visibly angry. Back on Earth, we used to have a saying: we judge a society by how it treats its most vulnerable. Seems like the galaxy's got some judging coming. Marcus pulled up the tactical displays, showing the deteriorating state of the Valix ship. Captain, even if we wanted to help, what could we do? The Pathfinder has emergency life support for maybe 200 people. There are 43,000 Valix on that ship. Sarah stared out the viewport at the dying crystalline vessel, its surface still catching and reflecting the light of the dying star. Inside her chest, something that had always defined humanity was stirring: the refusal to abandon those in need, regardless of the cost. The decision. Sarah made her decision during the ship's night cycle, standing alone on the observation deck as the Valix vessel slowly tumbled past. She had spent hours reviewing their options, running calculations, and considering the political implications. Every logical analysis led to the same conclusion. Helping the Valix was impossible. Humanity was still a minor power in galactic politics, with limited resources and few allies. Earth's entire merchant fleet couldn't transport 43,000 refugees, especially beings whose biological needs were so different from human requirements. The major powers had already made their positions clear, and defying them could mean isolation or worse for humanity. But logic had never been humanity's strongest suit. Throughout their history, humans had made their greatest achievements not through careful calculation, but through stubborn refusal to accept the impossible. The next morning, Sarah called her senior staff together and laid out her plan. It was ambitious to the point of insanity, requiring them to stretch every resource, call in every favor, and take risks that could end their careers or their lives. "We're going to evacuate them," she announced simply. The silence that followed was broken by Tom's incredulous laugh. "Captain, with all due respect, are you out of your mind? We don't have the ships, we don't have the resources, and we sure as hell don't have the political backing." "Then we'll find a way to get them," Sarah replied calmly. "Marcus, I want you to send an encrypted message to Earth Command. Tell them we've discovered a refugee crisis, and we're implementing the Samaritan Protocol." Dr. Vasquez looked confused. "The Samaritan Protocol? I've never heard of it." Sarah smiled grimly. "That's because I just made it up. But by the time Earth Command figures that out, we'll already be committed. Belina, I need you to work with the Valix to understand their biological requirements. What do they need to survive? How can we modify our life support systems to accommodate them?" "And me, Captain?" Tom asked, though his expression suggested he already knew the answer wouldn't be something he'd like. "You're going to figure out how to turn every cargo hauler, passenger liner, and/or freighter in this sector into a refugee transport. We're going to need every hull that can maintain life support." The engineer shook his head, but was already pulling up ship registries on his tablet. "This is crazy, Sarah. Even if we could convince civilian ships to help, even if we could somehow modify their systems, the major powers aren't going to just sit back and watch. The Corvini especially. They've made it clear they want the Valix dead. Then we'll have to make sure they don't succeed," Sarah said. She looked at each of her officers in turn, seeing the mixture of fear and determination in their eyes. "I know what I'm asking. This could end all our careers. We could be court-martialed, imprisoned, or worse. But I can't stand by and watch 43,000 innocent beings die when we have the power to save them." The vote was unanimous. Against all odds. The network awakens. Within 48 hours of Sarah's decision, something unprecedented began happening across human space. Word of the Valix crisis spread through unofficial channels. Merchant captains talking over subspace radio, engineers sharing technical challenges on secure forums, families of exploration crew members discussing the moral implications around dinner tables on distant colonies. The response was uniquely human. Captain Rita Okafor, commanding the freight hauler Tenacious, was the first to answer the call. Her ship was 3 days out from the Centauri colonies when she received Sarah's coded transmission. Without hesitation, she altered course for the Kepler 442 system, despite knowing her cargo contract would be voided. "My grandmother used to tell me stories about the Underground Railroad," she transmitted back to the Pathfinder. "She said there comes a time when you have to choose between what's legal and what's right. Count me in." Others followed. The passenger liner New Horizon, carrying tourists to the Vega Resort Station, diverted to join the growing fleet. Captain James Walsh, a former military officer, announced over the ship's intercom that they were participating in a humanitarian mission. Instead of complaints, he received a standing ovation from his passengers, many of whom volunteered to help with the evacuation efforts. The cargo ship Iron Will, the research vessel Curiosity, the mining barge Honest Work, one by one, human ships began converging on the dying star system. Each captain had their own reason for joining what the galactic news networks were already calling humanity's folly. Some were motivated by moral conviction, others by the simple human inability to ignore a cry for help. Dr. Vasquez worked around the clock, with harmony of many voices to solve the technical challenges of keeping Valix alive aboard human ships. The crystalline beings required specific harmonic frequencies to maintain their molecular structure, frequencies that human technology wasn't designed to produce. It's like trying to tune a guitar to sing opera. Tom Bradley grumbled as he modified the Pathfinder's life support systems, but even he had to admit fascination as the Valix demonstrated their abilities. They could literally sing broken equipment back into working order, their harmonic vibrations restructuring metal and crystal at the molecular level. When the first Valix refugees were transferred to human ships, something beautiful happened. The crystalline beings, despite their desperate situation, began helping their rescuers. A damaged power coupling that would have taken hours to repair was fixed in minutes by a Valix engineer who sang the fractured components back into alignment. When Dr. Vasquez injured her hand on a sharp piece of equipment, a Valix healer touched the wound and it closed without leaving a scar. The Empire responds. The growing fleet of human ships didn't go unnoticed. On the fourth day of evacuation operations, long-range sensors detected the approach of a Corvini battle group. 12 warships led by the dreadnought Sovereign's Wrath. Admiral Kexfranis, commander of the Corvini force, was a veteran of 17 interstellar conflicts. His scaled hide bore the ritual scarification that marked him as a member of the Corvini warrior caste, and his reputation for ruthless efficiency was known throughout the sector. Attention human vessels, his transmission crackled with barely controlled fury. You are in violation of Galactic Preservation Order 7749, which prohibits the transportation of biologically hazardous materials across sector boundaries. Cease your operations immediately and prepare to be boarded. Sarah stood on the bridge of the Pathfinder, now the flagship of a motley fleet of 37 human ships of every size and description. Around her, the evacuation continued as Valix refugees were distributed among the vessels according to their life support capacity. Admiral Kexfranis, she responded calmly. The beings we are evacuating pose no biological hazard. They are refugees fleeing a natural disaster. We are operating under humanitarian protocols recognized by the Galactic Charter of Sentient Rights. The Corvini Admiral's laugh was like the sound of grinding metal. Humanitarian protocols. Your species has been part of galactic civilization for barely 50 of your years. You do not have the authority to invoke such protocols, especially not for the benefit of genetic aberrations like the Valix. Then consider this an informal request for compassion. Sarah replied. These beings have done nothing wrong. They're simply trying to survive. Survival of the unfit weakens the gene pool, Kexfranis snarled. The Valix are evolutionary dead ends, crystalline parasites that contribute nothing to the galaxy. Their extinction is not only inevitable but necessary. You have 1 hour to abandon them and withdraw, or we will consider you accomplices in biological contamination. The stand. Sarah looked around her bridge at the faces of her crew. Marcus was pale but determined, his hand steady on the weapons console despite knowing their small exploration ship couldn't last 5 minutes against a Corvini dreadnought. Dr. Vasquez had tears in her eyes, but her jaw was set with resolve. Tom Bradley was running diagnostics on their engines, preparing for whatever was to come. Admiral, Sarah said, her voice carrying across the open channel for all the human ships to hear, I want to tell you a story about my species. 300 years ago, there was a ship called the Titanic. When it was sinking, the crew could have saved themselves first. Instead, they stayed at their posts, sending distress calls and helping passengers into lifeboats, even though they knew they probably wouldn't survive. She paused, watching the Corvini ships move into attack formation on her tactical display. More recently, during our Global War II, ordinary people risked their lives to hide refugees from systematic extermination. They knew they could be killed for helping, but they did it anyway because it was right. We have a saying, Admiral, the only thing necessary for evil to triumph is for good people to do nothing. Kex Franis's response was predictably dismissive. Sentiment and philosophy. Your species' emotional weakness will be your downfall. Maybe, Sarah agreed. But if caring about innocent lives is a weakness, it's one I'm proud to have. All human ships. This is Captain Chen. The Corvani have given us an ultimatum. I won't order anyone to stay and fight. This isn't your battle. The response came not from one ship, but from all 37 vessels simultaneously, captain after captain, from the largest passenger liner to the smallest cargo hauler, transmitted the same message. We stand with the Valix. The battle. What followed was less a battle than a demonstration of human ingenuity in the face of overwhelming odds. The Corvani warships were faster, better armed, and more heavily armored than anything in the human fleet. But the humans had something the Corvani didn't expect. Creativity born of desperation. The mining barge Honest Work had been hauling a cargo of industrial explosives when it received the call to join the evacuation. Captain Maria Santos, a former demolitions expert, had an idea that was either brilliant or suicidal. She powered down her ship's engines and began drifting toward the Corvani formation, transmitting a distress signal claiming engine failure. When the Corvani ship Bloodhunter moved in to investigate, Santos detonated her entire cargo hold. The explosion vaporized her ship but crippled the Corvani vessel, evening the odds slightly. The passenger liner New Horizon had been retrofitted with heavy-duty tractor beam emitters for docking with luxury space stations. Captain Walsh used them as weapons, grabbing chunks of debris from the dying Valix ship and hurling them at Corvani vessels like massive projectiles. But it was the Valix themselves who turned the tide of battle. As the human ships fought desperately to protect them, the refugees made a decision that surprised everyone. They began to sing. 43,000 crystalline voices joined in harmony, their song resonating through space in frequencies that human sensors could barely detect. The effect on the Corvani ships was immediate and devastating. Metal hulls began to vibrate in resonance with the Valix song, creating structural weaknesses that spread like cracks in glass. The dreadnought Sovereign's wrath shuddered as its armor plating began to separate. Internal systems failed as the harmonic frequencies disrupted the crystalline components in Corvani technology. Within minutes, Admiral Kex Franis found his mighty fleet disabled not by superior firepower, but by the collective voice of the beings he had intended to exterminate. New alliances. As the Corvani ships drifted helplessly, their systems overwhelmed by harmonic interference, Sarah opened a channel to the Admiral. Admiral Kex Franis, this is Captain Chen. As you can see, the Valix are far from helpless. They've disabled your fleet without destroying a single ship or harming a single crew member. That's the difference between us. You came here to commit genocide. We came here to save lives. The Corvani Admiral's response was filled with grudging respect despite his fury. You have surprised us, Captain. This changes nothing. The Corvani Empire will not forget this interference. Then remember this too, Sarah replied. Humanity doesn't abandon its friends. The Valix are under our protection now, and we keep our promises. As the evacuation continued, something remarkable began happening throughout human space. Colonies that had never heard of the Valix began preparing to receive refugees. Scientists on Earth started developing new technologies based on harmonic engineering principles shared by grateful Valix survivors. Artists and musicians began collaborating with crystalline beings whose understanding of harmony transcended anything humans had previously imagined. The galaxy had expected humanity to back down when faced with superior force. Instead, they had witnessed something unprecedented. An entire species willing to risk everything for beings they had just met, simply because it was the right thing to do. Dr. Vasquez stood beside Sarah on the observation deck as the last Valix refugees were transferred to human ships. The dying star cast its red light across the small fleet, and somewhere in the distance, the disabled Corvani vessels were slowly regaining power. What happens now? Elena asked. Sarah smiled, watching as harmony of many voices and several other Valeks worked with Tom Bradley to repair damage to the Pathfinder's engines. Their song filled the ship with harmonious vibrations that seemed to heal more than just machinery. "Now we show the galaxy what it means to have humanity as a friend," Sarah said. "The Valeks won't just survive. They'll thrive. And every species out there will know that when humans make a promise, we keep it." The message had been sent across the stars, carried by subspace transmissions and the songs of grateful Valeks. Humanity had taken its stand, and the galaxy would never be the same. In the depths of space, 43,000 crystalline voices sang of hope, harmony, and the strange young species that had refused to let them die alone. It was a song that would echo through the galaxy for generations to come, a reminder that sometimes the smallest acts of courage can change everything. The evacuation of the Valeks became known as the Kepler Incident, the moment when humanity announced itself not as another conquering empire, but as something the galaxy had never seen before, a species that measured its strength not by what it could destroy, but by what it was willing to protect. And in the years that followed, when other species found themselves desperate and alone, they would remember the story of how humanity looked at impossible odds and said, "You're not alone."